Welcome to the Planet Paintball Podcast, the ultimate podcast for paintball enthusiasts. Each week, we dive into the world of paintball, bringing you stories, insights, and tips from players, coaches, and industry insiders. Sponsored by 1023 Sportswear. Looking for high-quality gear that performs as hard as you do? Check out 1023 Sportswear. And as a listener of the Planet Paintball Podcast, you can get 20% off your order with the code Planet Paintball. Suit up, save big, and play your best.
All right, welcome back to the Planet Paintball Podcast. Today, I have Ken Barrett with me from Dark Carnival, Trauma, Gridlock, Extreme Sports Fulfillment, and a couple other teams. And most recently, the coach of Greenville, Growl, and the winners of the amateur ICPL Dark Carnival team. How you doing today, Ken?
Yeah, doing good. Thanks for having me on, Hunter.
Thanks for coming on. Like I was telling you beforehand, like you were on the top list when I started thinking of this. I want to get Ken on. So this is I think it's a big thing for the community. How did you find paintball?
So the short version would be, as I was getting out of high school, me and my buddies even did the water guns with Kool-Aid fiasco a few times, and then I found a paintball park. I went and played a few times. All of my closest friends was either playing like high up softball at that time, and I just went by myself. I went to VHA down at the Rock Quarry and Travelers Rush and played a couple times, and then I sold that gear because I didn't really know anybody and it was weird. And then a short time later, I got invited out to a backyard game where I rekindled my childhood friendship with Ray Newcomb, who he was running this game, and it was awesome. It was fun, and man, we spun a team out of that called Semi-Conscious. We went 98 Nashville Music City Open. Like we finished like second to last. It was awful. But that was it. When we got home for the next, I don't know, 16, 17 years, that's all I done.
So you stepped into it pretty quick, competitively speaking, at least.
Well, yeah, I probably played six or eight paintball games total, days before I went to a national level tournament.
What did you guys play? Like, what division did you play? Did you go into rookie or did you step up?
So back then it was just all open.
Okay.
So you just go play. And like I said, we finished second from last.
What gear were you using? What was the gun?
I had an autococker.
Okay. So the
CO
autococker was there.
On CO.
Nice. With the pod pack that comes out on the side.
That's right.
I think I still got one in the garage somewhere. Okay, so from that, what was the next step?
Well, so when we got home, we met up and I said, hey, I want to get really serious and I want to go win these things. So about half the group was in, half the group was out. The group that was in, we started going to this place called Planet Paintball every Saturday and Sunday, and that turned into Friday nights and sometimes on Wednesday nights. And then next thing you know, Luke Carnage, Joe Cavanaugh, who was one of my biggest mentors in paintball, he invited me on to his team and all my friends too. So we were essentially Absolute Carnage 3.
Okay.
But within just no time, he asked me to play on the one team, which that was my first experience of, for lack of better words, playing without my buddies, right? Mm-hmm. Playing with a new group. Even though I really enjoyed the new group and I liked them a lot, but leaving your buddies is always a hard part about paintball.
Yeah. Yeah. Sometimes if you want to go far, you got to leave some guys behind, unfortunately.
Yeah. And it comes down to commitment level, more so than even skill level. Everybody can't commit to the level of what I wanted to, period.
So back then, was it it was every weekend, both days, Friday night, Wednesday night too?
So I worked every other weekend at the time. So it was every other weekend, Saturday and Sunday, Friday nights, every opportunity I got. And within no time being on that team, we went to national level events. We took second. In Open 5-man in Chicago, NPPL. We played skyball, done pretty well. We didn't make it into the finals or nothing, but we done pretty well. That was a cool experience. But I was running Joe's park. Mm-hmm. As just us being friends. Like he would have, private groups and he worked on Friday night. So I would run the park for the the indoor for him. And then he eventually moved it outside. He lost the lease on that place, eventually moved it outside to Duncan. There was another little spot in between, but it's not worth talking about. But when he moved out to the Welford Duncan area, that's about the time that I quit my every other weekend job and went and found something else to do so I could passionately chase this professional paintball dream that I had. And I went and played for a team called Gridlock out of Greensboro, Paintball Greensboro, and played with Gridlock. We done really well, had a good time. Within a year of that, though, it was broke up by a team called Mayhem that went to play X-Ball to essentially be the next crew of Trauma, if you will.
Okay.
And then I didn't want to leave my friends that time. And there were some of my friends that wasn't included in on that deal, so I chose not to. And that was about the time that I started working for Extreme Sports Fulfillment, which they wanted a factory team. So we had a team called Extreme Sports Factory, which was me and the guys that wasn't invited into that other thing with Mayhem. And so we built a winning program. We won a lot of tournaments. We podiumed national event time after time. And eventually that business closed down. But again, so my role there is I was a wholesales rep. So I'm still selling equipment to Joe at Planet Paintball, New Generation, and like parks all across the Southeast. So I get to know a lot of people. Well, I'm really good friends with the folks that own this place called Alamo. And just one day they said they wanted to get out of it. And essentially he asked me, did I want to buy it? So with the help of another guy, I purchased Alamo, turned it into Upstate Paintball. And that was the birth of a whole lot of new chapters, meaning Upstate Army was more or less, I have a hard time explaining what that was, but it was more or less what I would call just a local league paintball, just organized. I coached it. Any and everybody could play on the team. I created teams within the organization that would move up from 3-man to 5-man, and then they would graduate on to the CFOA and et cetera, et cetera. It's kind of a tiered program, worked really good. And then not long after that, that goes on for about 2 years. Not long after that, Rob Steininger came up to me and he said, hey, I want you to come. We're putting Gridlock back together, and I want you to come run it with a close friend of mine named Roy Sears. And I said, no, man, I need to focus on my business. I need to do that. And then he said, hey, let's do it. You come do that, and then I'll be your business partner, and we'll do it that way. And so I did that. So now Upstate Paintball turned into Paintball Central Greenville. That's how that happened. Eventually, we lost the lease on that place and built the new part where it currently is. But all that said, I guess the next 7-8 years, I played on Gridlock and Trauma through that time. A ton of national events with Gridlock, done really well with Trauma. I enjoyed all that time. But you know, Hunter, the crazy part about all those different eras is, man, as close as my relationships, because you play on a team, you know how close you get with the guys you playing with. You know, every era and every team was special in its own way, right? Because I mean, those are your brothers, right? You're with them all the time, every weekend, you know, for lack of better words, you go into battle with them, right? So you're competing with them. And so you really get close with all these guys. But man, I have formed so many long lasting, crazy relationships through this ridiculous game. It's unreal. So jumping back on timeline. So I played on Trauma for a little while, and then my son was 3. I believe he was about 3. And man, we talked on the phone, and I got off the phone. We just picked up a bunch of new kids on Trauma, and it just didn't feel right. The chemistry wasn't there. And it was going to take a while to rebuild that, et cetera. But I just realized, man, my son's 3. And I barely know who he is, because I'm on an airplane or a paintball park every weekend when I'm not working. So when I got on the phone, I told Rob, and Trauma's coach at the time, I said, you know, take my name out of the hat. I'm done. Because we were talking about reducing the roster size. And I didn't want to see one of those young guys lose one of their spots for me, knowing that, you know, my hourglass was running out.
and your mind's kind of somewhere else.
It is, man. And then truly the next 16 years or so, I just focused on my oldest son, and then I had more kids. So, I played the absolute best dad I could be for the next 17 years, and I'm still trying to do that, right?
Mm-hmm.
To me, that's the era of all my life is being a dad, right?
Yeah, no, it's the best thing.
Yeah, it's crazy, man. And then, man, Carolina Crisis was playing, and I got asked to come coach those guys a few times, and I just didn't want no part of it, But one time I did go out to just kind of see how it felt, and then they evidently canceled practice, and nobody even told me, and I said, hey, there's my son, right? So about 3 more years later, Mark Henley created Greenville Growl. And man, he's calling me, every couple months. He's like, hey, come coach us. And so finally I just met with him, and we decided that we came to terms on me coaching. And so I went and coached that group, and man, that was really fun. Coaching, I was always a player coach, like on the field. I've pretty much, always been like a captain of whatever team I was on. So it wasn't a hard transition for me to coach. The only difference was I wasn't playing, which that's tough, right?
Yeah.
So, here you are, you're standing outside the net, you don't get to shoot anybody. That's awful. But I still found some wins inside of game planning, strategy and roster moves and just improving the team, from the time I showed up to the time that we called it quits, which, to be clear on that, kind of caught Greenville Growl at the end of their career anyway.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I think the average age of the roster was something crazy, like 35 years old.
Yeah.
I mean, playing semi-pro paintball with an average age of 35, that's tough, man. That's really tough. I mean, you see Dynasty now. I mean, I don't want to say they're on the backside of the hill, but it certainly feels that way, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
But I mean, those guys have been on top of the hill forever. So that's
they've also built their whole life around paintball, where like your guys have businesses and jobs, and it's a little harder at 35 to maintain all that and play semi-pro, I would imagine.
Yeah. Absolutely, man. So that was a cool time. And then at the tail end of that, we just kind of talked about, how do we continue to see each other, man? We have such a good time together. So we talked about playing 10-man. So we went and played 10-man this just about a month ago, down in Florida, the ICPO World Cup. And man, it started off rough. Like, we lost our first 2 games, but from that point on, it felt easy. And that's not disrespectful to anybody we were playing against. It just felt natural and easy amongst us, is what I meant. Our communication, our game plans, what everybody's job was. It was just really, so we were able to run through the rest of the tournament and win it, and we had a great time.
Yeah, pretty convincingly from Matt's footage.
So, the only 2 games that we didn't win past the first 2 that we lost was strategic. Like, we went into the game knowing, hey, we only got to kill, or excuse me, we only got to shoot 4 guys, and not let them get our flag, right? So once it was kill 4, I mean, we would have the numbers to go close the game, but we were smarter than that. We just kind of stayed where we were and wouldn't allow them to make any advancements or any moves to better their positioning. So we would just let time run out because we understood the situation.
Yeah. Well, and that's something that, I think obviously with your years and experience in it, you get, right? I think some new teams, especially new teams to that format, don't always understand. I need to be checking the board, doing the math to know what I really need. So, okay. You mind if we kind of go back and drill down on some of those things?
Oh, absolutely.
Okay. So you had Dark Carnival kind of with Carnage at the same time, right? Like,
no.
Did they one evolved out of the other?
Yeah. So what happened there was so I mentioned Joe Kavanaugh, right? This guy that I just looked up to. He was the first paintball player that I played with that just had like unbelievable talent and instincts, and And so I just looked up to him so much. And then, so I patterned a little bit of my game after him, but at the time, but he was really more into it for friendships and fun.
Yep.
And that's okay. There's nothing in the world wrong with that. I mean, that's part of the game, and that's why we love it too, right? But, you know, we started off pretty early finding out that really my ambition was to win and keep going forward and
Absolutely.
progress and go up the ladder. And Joe just didn't want to. So, you know, me and some other guys, we decided that we wanted to take it more serious. And it's a crazy story, man. Me, John White, Mike Reese, Mark Smith, and Dave Melton, Chris Robinson, you know, we all met in my garage, you know, away from Planet Paintball, and just collectively talked about, hey, what do we want to do here? Because Joe don't want to, you know, carry this thing to the next step. So we took the step and created Dark Carnival. So we kind of left Absolute Carnage to go create this thing, which the next part is always funny to me, just how things come full circle. We couldn't find enough good players to make ourselves competitive. So then Joe joined Dark Carnival, right?
It happens all the time, right? You look at the team and then you're like, hey, I kind of need some of you.
Yeah. So, well, Joe and, you know, Sean, Greg, and Brad and all those dudes, they were really good. They were kind of like the seniors on Absolute Carnage. So they all joined us. The only difference is now me and another group of guys are deciding, you know, what tournaments we're playing, how often we're practicing, you know, our routines, et cetera, and Joe wasn't, right? So never in the world, don't misunderstand anything I just said about Joe. I want to make sure you know that
No.
I wasn't saying anything bad.
The full disclosure, I grew up in the scene. I grew up at Old Planet.
Yeah.
And like, you know, I saw it happen, and it was such a smooth transition. Like, I didn't realize it, even, if that makes sense. Like, I knew that you guys were playing this Dark Carnival now, but it was never made a big deal. You know, it was still the senior guys at the field going out and doing their thing. I just always assumed it was a transition to, hey, we're going to take the step to 10-man, be more competitive. Let's do a new name. So,
and there's some truth to that too. So, but that's the history of that. But man, I learned a lot from all those guys. You know, Sean McDermott, you know, Greg and Brad Bauer and Joe. They taught me a lot. It was just a great time. Great time to be at Planet, man.
Yeah, it was. And solid. Those guys are solid guys. Like, to this day.
Yeah,
I haven't seen Greg in a while, but I keep hearing about him. So I know we're circling around each other. Just haven't ran into each other yet. So from there, Gridlock, right?
So the whole Dark Carnival story is, you know, that group of guys that met in my garage, essentially about half of them didn't have, you know, the determination or the means to chase this thing like I wanted to, whether it be financial, whether it be work, whether it be, you know, family obligations. I'm married at this time, but I don't have any kids. Dark Carnival was my baby. So some of those guys kind of fell off as time went. And every time one fell off, I really tried to add a really solid piece to make us much better. Well, this goes on for a couple of years, man. Next thing you know, half my team's from Atlanta. I love all those guys to death. I formed such a good relationship with them. I mean, you know, Cowboy, Bishop, Mad Dog, all those guys, man, love them to death. But next thing I know, we're doing much better. But man, half the team is just, you know, pounding beers at 10 a.m. And I realized, you know, man, I'm putting way too much time and effort into this, and you know, I had been talking to Gridlock for a while before I joined, and then John and Shannon from Gridlock gave me an opportunity to join the squad. So I go up and I do that. So it's a whole new team to me. It's 3 hours away. I'm the only guy from down here. Well, within a little bit of time, I get Jared Powell, who owns Insane Paintball over in Chattanooga.
Okay, yeah.
He was one of the guys that I picked up when one of the guys fell off, right? Jared was a kid at the time, which had a lot of potential. He was really good, meshed with him really well, easy to teach. Anyways, he had the youth, he had the willpower and the determination to continue chasing it. So I eventually got him on Gridlock, and this guy named Mike Robinson that was from the old Alamo, but came through Dark Carnival right there at the tail end of the stay. But I seen a ton of potential in him too. So got those two on Gridlock, and then we go compete. We're doing well. And then, like I said, in just a short amount of time, of my time on Gridlock 10-man, it was torn apart by that other team, Mayhem.
Mm-hmm. So were you on Gridlock when it went to, when the X-Ball started, essentially?
So I was, yes. And we decided to play 10-man still.
Okay.
So we were like one of 20, what was called, we were in the Pro-Am division.
Mm-hmm.
So it was half pros, half amateur, but there wasn't enough teams to keep it split because a lot of the teams went on and played X-Ball. Well, that Mayhem team that I talk about that was being built was going to be an X-Ball team.
Gotcha.
It was a spin off of Gridlock with some younger kids from the CFOA, which turned out to be phenomenal players. I think their CFOA name team was Delusional, but I mean, Stevie and Jay Wall, JV, man, they had some really good players. And then, you know, half of Gridlock and Delusional made Mayhem to begin with. And then within no time, all those kids were on trauma.
Gotcha. Okay. Did you go to play any of the MPPLs, the Super 7?
With trauma, I did.
Okay. So, but that's later, right?
That's way later. Yeah.
Okay. So you did the 10-man with the 10-man Pro-Am with Gridlock. Did you finish out that season? Because I know Extreme was the X-Ball team, right?
So about mid-season of the last year of 10-man, that the MPPL, I believe it was, or whatever they were called then. I don't think it was still MPPL. I think they had MPPL 10-man, and then they had X-Ball on the same properties, but same entity, but just different umbrellas, if you will. Well, so about halfway through that season is when the Mayhem Gridlock split happened, and I decided not to go be a part of that, which, you know, I think about a month or so ago, you may have met Robert Piper, or you may know Robert. Robert was so it was me, Tony Alvarez, Robert Piper, and a few other guys that was on the Gridlock team that we decided to go make XSF. And then we had a phenomenal season in CFOA. We won a ton of tournaments, and it was a fully funded team, so it also made it easy, right? Mm-hmm. That was my first fully funded team. Even practice paint and everything was taken care of, which was huge back then.
Yeah.
And then at the end of that season, which it kind of all runs together for me, but I'm guessing that's 03, maybe?
Sounds about right.
So at the end of that season, me, Tony, Robert, Mike Reese, a couple other guys, Mike Robb was on that team, phenomenal piece on that team. We decided to have a kids team, and we made a XSF kids team for CFOA, which included a lot of great players to even be pro later. Mark Henley, Jake Fristo, and there were some other really good guys on that team. Well, essentially at the end of the season, we combined with the kids team and went and played 03 World Cup in X-Ball. That was our first X-Ball event.
Okay.
And I think we finished second or third. But
I remember you guys doing really well.
We podiumed very first event, and then within just a little time after that, the next year rolls around. John Tinker and Jared from Insane those two went and done the Mayhem split. Well, when they took all those young kids to Trauma, you know, those guys really didn't have much, so they come and joined us. So then all of 04, we ran XSF. Had a really successful season, really good. Now, by the time we're getting to the end of that season, XSF, Extreme Sports Fulfillment as a company is starting to struggle. You know, I can kind of see the writing on the wall. Our fully funded situation is over. But I also just bought Upstate Paintball. Right. So now in 05, Upstate Paintball is now funding XSF. And I had to pick up a ton of new guys because some of the other guys, it wasn't, I wasn't going to fully fund XSF out of Upstate Paintball.
Yeah.
So I wanted the guys to be pot committed too, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I lost Tony and Robert, and I lost a few other guys. Man, one guy I didn't shout out the whole time during those times is John Barrett, Peanut out of Atlanta. Man, he stayed with me. I love him to death. So we in '05, man, we went to that monsoon out in California, and we're a brand new Shocker team. All this time now, I've been die.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I come out of autocockers right into matrices, and I pretty much stayed there. There was one season that I used an intimidator.
I remember that intimidator.
But for the most part, I've been pretty much all die most of my career. Well, in '05, when we rolled in over there, man, those Shockers would not shoot in the rain. They just would not. And Trauma loaned us a bunch of guns to play, you know, a couple of our prelim games. We done well enough to do okay. And the next tournament we done okay, but it just wasn't the same. So now I picked up this whole team out of the CFWA called Overload, right? Which, excuse me. You also got to know some really good pros come out of those guys too. Heyman Chapman, Todd Mullis, Brian Carlton was really good. Matt Casey was a really good player, played on Gridlock. Bradley Dunlap. All those guys, although they were really good and really young, and XSF still had very good potential, it was just going to take us a little while to gel. But we ran out of money, right?
Mm-hmm.
So remember that piece. Well, now I'm tired of funding it. And when I say I'm funding it, I'm paying entry fees at this point, and the team has to pay for their own travel and paint.
Mm-hmm.
But we had a pretty good deal with PMI at the time, where we shot evil, and we got event paint and whatnot, but practice paint we're having to pay for at this point. So all the time, about halfway through that season, Gridlock is making a comeback into X-Ball.
Okay.
That's when Rob and Roy approached me talking about, you know, hey, come back and do this thing with us, blah, blah, blah. And I did. So I think Gridlock done really good their first tournament without us. And when I say us, the next tournament, XSF didn't play. We were shut down and kind of in limbo. By the next tournament, about half of XSF joined Gridlock.
Okay.
And that was for World Cup 05. And it took us a little while to mesh, particularly through the off season. But 06, we start the season. We finished like 4th or 5th in Texas. Now we're playing semi-pro Division I at this time.
Mm-hmm.
And then we started rattling off wins at I think we won 3 in a row, first place. And then I went to Trauma.
Okay.
And then like within a few weeks of me being on Trauma, Mark Henley got the invite to join. And the whole Trauma time is a whole nother story, right? Mark joined, and then 07, you know, about half the Gridlock kids joined.
Okay.
And that's when we kind of had to like start over and start trying to gel again with half a Trauma and half a Gridlock, which eventually led to just, I wanted to be a dad anyway.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah. No, I get it. When my son was born, he might have been 2 at the time, actually. He still had pacifiers or something, so maybe even younger. I went to play an event and found, you know, one of his little toys or something in my gear bag. And I was like, I think I'd rather be home with my kid right now, you know? So I get it. It's not a tough choice at that point, you know? It is, but it isn't.
Yeah. So special times throughout all those different teams, though, man. Special times. A lot of great relationships. Like still love all those dudes, man. But I told you that, you know, coming back to the Trauma story, that was a tough transition for me. Here I am, this old guy. I had lost, nearly 100 pounds through the Gridlock time. Quit smoking, you know, doing everything I could do to put myself in a position to play pro before I had to quit. Because I knew I was on a clock because I had a family at home. So man, I joined Trauma and being able to form relationships with Tyler and Duder and Dave and man, Bobby Sink, Stevie, all those guys, man. Lucian Blackburn, I was really close with him. But playing with LaSoya was phenomenal, man.
Yeah, LaSoya was on the team. I forgot about that.
Playing with LaSoya was like playing with Tyler, who I consider to be probably, you know, top 2-3 snake guys in all of paintball history. Playing with Tyler was special. Love Tyler to death. But you got to understand, when I first started playing, Tyler was just a kid in the CFOA that I didn't even know.
Mm-hmm.
When I first started playing, I'm watching Lasoya on the pro field do Lasoya stuff.
Yeah.
So me getting to play with him was incredible.
So after all that time, you're on Trauma, your transition also to like playing some 7-man with them, right? Did you guys play under Trauma or Image for that?
So I believe I played one event under the Image name, but all the other events, I played the first couple under Trauma, which was kind of a mix of Trauma guys and a few of the Gridlock younger guys that were eventually going to become Trauma. And then, then one event out of the 4 or 5 that I played, I think we played as the Image, and we went to the finals or semifinals in San Diego, maybe it was Boston. I can't remember. Man, all that's a blur, right? But we do extremely well in one of the events in the pro division, and then by the next event, I think Frank the Tank came in and played my spot, and I ran the semi-pro line.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
How was the transition? Because you spent so much time in X-Ball, going back to, it's more similar to like a 10-man. How was there a transition? Is it all paintball?
Yes. No. So, I mean, paintball's paintball, but when you're shooting 15.5 or whatever it was, full auto, just holding it down versus going back and trying to play semi-automatic, that was a huge learning curve again. That changed everything. The game plans and how fast you play obviously has to change, which that was hard for our whole group. That's why I would say we were never the true contenders in 7-man. I mean, we beat a lot of good teams and we had some tournaments, but I mean, we didn't win any of them.
Yeah. It seemed like a hard left for you guys at that point, because you guys had like just won the full season, right? With Trauma.
So I was on Gridlock at the time. I wasn't a part of the 05 World Championship team, but Trauma did just win the 05 World Championships. And then I joined the following year.
Gotcha. Okay. Yeah, I thought you were on the 05 for some reason. Cool. So you mentioned Mark kind of dragged you back out, if you will. You guys had a pretty good year, not, depending on how you look at it, I guess. How do you view Greenville Growl's year, I guess, is what I'm asking.
So when I first came back, let's talk about that first.
Okay. And that was halfway through their last season? Not 24, but
that was halfway through 23.
Okay.
So when I showed up, the team practiced like twice before every event. It was a layout practice and one other practice. So literally these guys played, there's 5 tournaments, right? So they played 15 times in a year, and they thought they were going to be competitive doing that. So that's the very first thing I changed is I created a much more rigorous practice schedule and a ton of drills and more inter squad stuff. And then we quickly seen dividends from that. And they also, I don't know how they ran things before I showed up in terms of personnel and lines and how that goes. I didn't ask, didn't really care, but I'm a big believer in it no matter what level you play, whether it's, and I say this for the folks watching, I don't care if you're playing D5, D4, D3, whatever it is. If you are playing fair, meaning playtime is equal, you are not going to win, because there's not 7, 8, 9 guys created equal. There's 5 guys who create the best squad that you can possibly put out there. And then you sub. I've always had the philosophy since X-Ball is I always did what I just called it A's and B's. So the A's were the starting 5 on the basketball court, if you will.
Okay.
You don't change a point guard for a center, right? You change a center for a center. So the center gets a break. So the 3 in paintball, the 3 gets a break. Well, the backup 3 plays the spot with the other 4 A's, right? You're not swapping off lines for lines. To me, that's insane. It's crazy. Nobody can convince me that that's the way to do it. I truly believe the way to do it is you keep your A's on the field as much as possible. and the Bs play when the A's need a break. Now, the caveat to that is what if your B has a game? Then spin him. Put him back out there. Ride the hot hand all the time. But if he doesn't have a good game, then the A got his break and he's ready to go right back. You know what I mean? So we got off topic there.
No, that's great though.
So I even forgot where we were, to be honest with you.
You had just came into Greenville Growl.
So when I showed up, again, I don't know how they ran it, but I immediately went into what I call A's and B's. That was tough for the group to start with because of egos, and that's tough for a lot of people to swallow. That what do you mean I'm a B? Well, I mean it's either go take the A spot or leave. You know what I mean? I mean there's really not a whole lot of options there. But as time went on, we lost a few guys, and we were able to upgrade some positions. Man, adding Matt the Gym Rat, that's been a phenomenal relationship that I've been able to build. Let me back up a little bit though. The core was Mark, Freeze, and RB, Tall T, Kevin, etc. But when I came back, I made a call to Josh Barton. I said, look, if they're dragging me out, I'm dragging you out. And he obliged, right? So he came and he joined the team, which is phenomenal. I mean, he's a phenomenal player. One of the most consistent guys I've ever seen play. But that being said, our very first event with me coaching, I think we went pretty far into Sunday, but we didn't reach what I call the finals, which is top 4. I think we finished 5th or 6th or something like that.
Okay.
The next event was World Cup. We did, but the team that beat us, I believe, was Scout that went on to the finals, which going back to my first event, the only team that really beat us was PB Fit, which, I mean, those guys are phenomenal, man. I mean, they were better than us. They had better chemistry. They had better gun skills. They play all the time. And that's what it takes. So then we go off into the off season. We had a pretty good World Cup, but not where I wanted to be. We go off into the off season, and we take a little bit of time off, but not a ton. We get right back to work. Man, we had Jay Aller, who was just he's a guy that Tall T knew from back in the Charlotte Bloodhound days. I don't know if you heard of that team.
Yep. Played against them a little bit.
Yep. They were a good national level team, but I had no idea who this guy was. Brought him in for a tryout. Super athletic, super fast, incredible personality. Just fell in love with him right off the get. And then Matt came and tried out for us. Matt was a super good ad. I mean, just a sponge. I mean, anything you gave him, man, he just absorbs it, and, super intelligent, crazy athletic. We added Austin Castor, who had previously played on Carolina Crisis and then went and played on the NRG Elite Pro. Then he took some time off because I know he's got 2 daughters. He was dad, right? He came back and joined us, which immediately made us much better. Well, little did we know, as hard as we was working, man, that division is stacked.
Yeah.
The semi-pro division this past season was absolutely stacked. I mean, the Sea Dogs are really good. Wrecking Crew came in just out of nowhere. I mean, out of D2, just a bunch of kids with an incredible amount of confidence. Just really, really good. But, I mean, they got the financial backing where they play every weekend and et cetera. But with those 2 teams and, there's leverage. Leverage is really good. And then we roll into Vegas. And then they do this crazy, counterbalance field where half of it's snake and half of it's Dorito, and then it's flipped on the other side, right? Our guys just could not comprehend how to play that field. And it's crazy. I said it for weeks on weeks. Actually, we only get the layout for a week in advance, but I said it the whole week. I said speed and taking ground is going to win this field. Greenville Growl, that is not necessarily their strength, right? Now, there's a few guys that play that way, but for the most part, as a group, they're a slower, methodical. I take Greenville Growl 5 alive against anybody, right?
Mm-hmm.
That's the mentality of the team too. So the team doesn't like to take a lot of risks, which at the end of the day, I'm going to tell them to break out and they're going to do what I ask them to do. But I can't make them do secondaries and thirds and et cetera, et cetera. Well, we struggled. We got beat to death in Vegas. So our goal was to go pro, win the division, go pro. Well, we didn't do well. We did awful, actually. I think we went 2-2 and came home. Next event, we finished second. We just ran out of gas for the finals, quite frankly. It's just what happened. And then, so Texas was a really good event. And then the next event, I believe, was Chicago or New Jersey. I can't remember. I get them flip-flop. But nonetheless, we played pretty good. One of them and not as good in the other. But nonetheless, because of Vegas, we weren't in any kind of points race to challenge leverage for the championship, simply put. So before we even rode into World Cup is when we had the conversation of, hey, what's next? We already know this is over. We're not doing this anymore. And that's when the 10-man
came out of that.
Yeah.
So what, and can you share with us what the plan is for the 10-man? Are you going to keep rolling it in 2025?
Yeah, absolutely. I won't share all the information that I have because it's not my information to share, but we've lost a few guys to go play 10-man with some other guys, and I wish them luck. Love those guys to death, but simply put, we're going to replace those guys and we're going to go play. Our plan is to play the ICPL series, which is 3 events, and we may play another one or two like the CFOA or just a one-off tournament somewhere, but we're going to play 4 or 5 tournaments maybe and have a good time doing it, man. Be very competitive.
Awesome. Are you guys going to keep rolling with the Dark Carnival name or undecided yet, or can't tell me?
Well, it's a little undecided.
Okay.
I would say probably, for me, which I'll take a little bit of a break from the conversation to go back to that. For me, for the guys to oblige me and run under the Dark Carnival name was pretty special this past ICPL, because as hard as me and all my friends at the time worked to get Dark Carnival on a podium in 10-man back in the 90s and early 2000s, we were never able to do it. So for Dark Carnival to come out on the national stage and win a 10-man event was pretty special to me. And
That's
with
awesome.
those guys,
It's a great group of guys. All those guys are awesome. Well, that's all. I didn't realize you had never gotten a national win with Dark Carnival. So that makes that even more special, man. I know a lot of the old crew was excited when they saw the name, although I think John leaked it. I know a lot of them were glued to the APA watching you guys as you went along. Myself included. I had to keep checking in on you.
Awesome.
So I was really stoked for you guys, especially you and Kevin and Mark, who I've had deeper relationships with, and have known longer. Like, I was really excited for you guys. You've run a lot of organizations, a lot of big organizations. What has been key to those for you? Like, let me rephrase the question. What makes a successful organization versus a unsuccessful organization?
That's a tricky question, right? And and there's lots of different depths to that question. But the first answer is really simple for me, is transparency and honesty. I see a lot of organizations fail because there's this backdoor scene of some puppet playing, if you will, where I have always been extremely honest and upfront. If you weren't playing to the level that you needed to play, then you may need to go down a level and someone else is going to come up. And never did I never tried to backdoor anybody. Like, I've always tried to be upfront and honest and say, hey, these are the things you need to work on, et cetera, in order to be where you want to be. And it comes right down to, do they have the determination and the means to do it? A lot of guys want to do it, but they just, again, going back to what I said earlier, with family and jobs and responsibility, some guys just can't do it. And that's understandable too. But I don't know how to say this as well as I want to, Hunter, but my whole life, no matter what it is I'm playing, even when I coach my kids in whatever youth sports that they're playing, man, I want to win. I want to put the best product on the field as I can all the time. If I say things to hurt people's feelings because of that, well, then that's not my intent, right? But my intent is always truthfully to be the best we can be. And I'm going to find a way to get the best out of each guy that I possibly can. Now, there's been guys over the course of all the years that I never found that way to communicate right with them. Mm-hmm. But some guys, for lack of better words, need to be ass patted, right? Mm-hmm. And coddled, if you will. And some guys, I always try the direct and harsh approach first, right? To understand.
It is the simplest. If the guy can take it, it's definitely the simplest.
It is. And you find out real quick how you need to manage that guy, mm-hmm. right? Paintball taught me a lot about, management in business, but I also learned a lot of tools from that side of it when I came back to coach Growl.
Okay.
So, you can't treat everybody the same. Even though you want to, mm-hmm. now your morals and standards never change, right? But you can't communicate with everybody the same way. It just doesn't work. And so that's part of the answer to your question is management of people, keeping things honest, keeping things transparent. And as long as you can have an organization of 8 people or 50 people, as long as they all understand the path and how it works. Because again, if they understand, then for lack of better words, they can't bitch about it. Mm-hmm. They can't create coups. They can't create spinoffs or whatever you might call it.
Yeah. Now that I'm thinking about it, like at your field, you had the upstate program, the upstate Army program that kind of went into Dark Carnival. Yeah. Like at a certain level or no?
So it did. It fed Dark Carnival.
Okay.
I don't want to call it Little League because that's some guys is going to take disrespect from that, mm-hmm. that came through it. But in my mind, the Upstate Army was much like the local league, right? Mm-hmm. The local,
it's like AAA baseball, if you will.
The local club, right? Mm-hmm. So you had to come to practice twice a month. The prerequisites is you had to come to practice twice a month. One of those weekends, I'm coaching. The other weekend is usually just a scrimmage day. And then I'm off doing my thing with whatever team I'm on that's out of town. But with that said, as guys progress, like you'll lose guys if you don't keep moving the good ones up. Mm-hmm. And there's also an eye for understanding. You need a leader on each one of those smaller squads in the organization. So I'd always kind of see a leader, see how they interact, see how they communicate with the guys. Okay, so hey, I need you to be the captain, right? So you manage the hotels and this and that. But at the local level, they didn't have hotels. So I created a 3-man league local, mm-hmm. and they all played in the 3-man league. So it might be Upstate Army, black, green, camo, orange, red, whatever it might be. So they had somewhat of their own identity, but they were a part of an organization. Well, as guys progressed, then they went off to, at the time, it was the South Carolina Field Owner Association, the SCPFOA, I think it was called. Well, that was the first step of 5-man. Well, once you graduated that, you went to the CFOA because the competition level was much stiffer. Well, once you progress through that, and now at this time, Hunter, I probably got realistically 16, 17 teams, counting all the 3-man teams, the SCPFOA mm-hmm. team, the CFOA teams, which, a lot of field owners don't find that to be a good model because they think tournament paintball players are just whiny and they want everything for free. But if the paintball players are getting a good product for their money, right, you don't get a whole lot of pushback. And never did I truly create Upstate Army for revenue, but it did give me constant revenue. Mm-hmm. Does that make sense? Right?
Yeah,
they got discounted rates, but I also knew I could plan my business around, when they had practice and this and that and mm-hmm. other. Well, so once they run through the CFOA, and they do pretty well with the gyms, if you will. Mm-hmm. The guys who were excelling, well, then they got an opportunity to try out for Dark Carnival. Mm-hmm. And because Dark Carnival was a really good regional team at the time. Well, the next stair step to that is Gridlock had an organization, a national organization that had D3, D2, and D1. Well, if you wanted to leave the regional level, well, then there was a path through Gridlock. And then Trauma being the goal for most of all the organizations. So that was the path. Well, now there's no such path. I've seen guys, create their own way, which kudos to them. And that's what I had to do.
Yeah.
But there's no super easy path anymore.
No. Yeah. And Chris Lennon made his own path. Oh my gosh, Jared Lackey, who spent years grinding around in the CFOA. Chris Shear, I think those are the 3 pros we got right now from the Carolinas. And they all came after the big farm teams, if you will. We're done. No, go ahead.
All I was going to say is this crazy? It's crazy. When I came back, the first thought that I had is damn, all these pro teams are pretty much the same people as they were when I left. You know what I mean? So I immediately start thinking about, why is young people not playing paintball? Well, we won't get into that. That's a much deeper subject. But then I realized, man, I coached Kyle Spica. And I coached Chris Shear at a time. And both of them are still top of the game, doing extremely well. I think Chris is up for Dorito Player of the Year. And
yeah, I think so.
Some awards this year. Anyways, super happy for those guys. It's just cool to kind of know that, some of those guys are still around. But back then, I'm going to go off topic just for a second.
Go for it.
Out of all of South Carolina, there's only been a handful of pros ever. I think, man, I probably shouldn't go down the list because I didn't put any thought into it. But but I think Steven Lasher was probably the first one.
Okay.
Which, oddly enough, was on Gridlock D2 and then D1 just for a short period of time, I think. But then he went to an Infamous camp, and Infamous picked him up out of one of their camps.
Okay.
Like one of those seminar kind of things.
Yeah.
But anyways, I think he was the first. I was the second. Mark Henley was the third. And I think Eddie Dawes is the last. Now, I know Brad Meads is pro, and he lives down around Myrtle Beach.
Yeah.
I almost said yeah. I don't. But I think he lives in South Carolina. But those guys in my mind are transplants, right?
They both kind of moved here.
Yeah. So with all that said, we're talking about 4 or 5 pros in the history of all of South Carolina. Isn't that crazy with all the paintball that we've had in the Southeast?
It is. And I think a lot of us I obviously didn't go pro, but a lot of them, yourself included, had to go up to North Carolina to kind of forge that path.
Sure did.
And I don't know if anyone from the Carolinas made it into the Ultimate camp or not. I know Rob was from North Carolina, but he said he didn't play with the Ultimates Pro. But for a long time, Trauma was the path, and that was everyone's goal, was to kind of build a team and then get picked up by a Gridlock and kind of feed into that system, if you will.
It was a great time, man. It was a good time for paintball.
Yeah, it was. And the CFOA during many of those years was the second largest league in the nation, right?
Yeah, sure was.
So, and I think we had people coming up all over. The LTZ guys set up camp out here at one point. Tried to do what they did on the West Coast out here.
I don't think that worked out very well for them.
I don't think it did either. I remember seeing it, and I don't think they made it through the whole season. I'd love to find someone who was involved with it to give me the insight, but I don't remember seeing much of them. So, kind of tried to come and play ball in someone else's yard, didn't they? So, being a former field owner and part of and I think it's one of the largest conglomerates of fields. Was it always just 3 fields after you got in?
It was 3 fields and 5 stores.
5 stores.
At the time. I think about all the stores, but one's gone.
Mm-hmm. It's a little rough for brick and mortar these days. If someone wanted to open a field, what would you tell them?
That's a tough question too. So I mentioned Jared Powell, the owner of it, and me and him talk about it all the time. There's profitability in it, but the one thing that I'm going to tell you and anybody else that wants to listen is you will not build a prosperous financial life ever through this game. It took me getting out of it for long enough to realize, looking back at my time in it, that, I was fortunate enough to play, for maybe bad words, but a kid's game for a long time. And man, I had a good time and I loved every minute of it, still do. But there's truly no money to be made in this game. And I can't even put my finger on why that is. Excuse me. But I can tell you, since I've been back, I noticed that there's very few young people that play. And again, not without getting into that rabbit hole, I just think today's generation of kids is too weak to play the game. I wish that wasn't the case, but nobody wants to get shot and feel that immediate pain. Like, they think about that more than they think about the gratitude of shooting somebody else. To be successful as a player in this game, you absolutely got to think about, eliminating other players before you worry about you getting eliminated.
Yeah. Otherwise, you're going to stay in the back.
I do think there's a good model out there that you can make money. I mean, obviously rec play is the key. I've seen some fields do pretty well, but I think you have to add airsoft now. I've seen some guys do the gel ball, which for me, I probably wouldn't offer that as much as I would strictly do paintball and airsoft in combination. And segment parts of my park for each. But one of the things, talking about the Upstate Army, one of the things that I'll never understand is why field owners don't see the value in that. I mean, if you can create your own local league that's plentiful, full of players, even though that it's at a discounted rate, most I'll say it this way, most field owners would rather have less players at a high margin than more players at a lower margin. But the reality of it is, if there's not people to play with, then it's awful.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? If there's nobody at the park, then people's not going to come. So you have to create a culture that people is attracted to.
Yeah. I would agree with you there. A big part of the paintball field owner success is creating a culture. Insane is obviously like one of the standouts in the region. Great culture. I think the guys at Bear Ridge have a good culture going on. Paintball Fit obviously has a great culture. I think they're only tournament fields at their facility, and
you got to think about something.
Making money.
To think about something that you just said there, though, the last two, I missed the first one, but the last two that you mentioned, that's not their primary income.
No, it is not. They have other job.
Nope, they're doing that for fun, bud.
Yeah, so I guess the takeaway is do it for passion, not for the money.
That's what it has to be.
Which is fair. I think there's a lot of stuff like that. There's race car teams where it's passion. It's the motor track people. A lot of it's passion. It's not the primary thing. So, we're right over an hour, which is kind of where I like to keep it. If you're good, any last words?
No, I just appreciate the time. I see you trying to grow the podcast. I think it's awesome. I keep, I watch it. I see what you got going on. And I wish you luck with it.
Trying.
Hopefully we get some more mechanical days out there pretty soon together.
Yeah, no, always down for it. You guys need sparring, guys. Let me know.
Awesome.
Thanks for tuning in to the Planet Paintball podcast. We hope you enjoyed today's episode. Whether you're out there grinding in the divisional pits or chasing dreams on the pro stage, remember, it's all about the passion, the hustle, and the love for the sport. Shout out to 1023 Sportswear for sponsoring the show. Don't forget to use code Planet Paintball at checkout for 20% off your order. Gear up, save big. Until next time, keep grinding, keep growing, and we'll see you back here on the Planet Paintball podcast